What if I told you that Bigfoot is not alone? In the most remote corners of the planet, there are tales, stories, and legends of creatures that seem to be their distant relatives. From the icy peaks of the Himalayas to the dense jungles of South America, these stories cross cultures, eras, and borders, as if they hide a common pattern that defies all logical explanation. But here's the disturbing thing. How is it possible that civilizations separated by oceans and centuries describe such similar beings? Is it coincidence, or something deeper, something that connects us to a past that we have not yet managed to decipher? In this video, we will see these stories, not only to learn about them, but to question what we think we know about the world around us. Origin of the Bigfoot myth. The myth of Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, comes mainly from Native American communities. For centuries, indigenous tribes along the Pacific Northwest have told stories of large, hairy beings living in the forests and mountains. These creatures are often described as peaceful, but also mysterious and elusive. The name Sasquatch comes from the word Sasquatch, used by the Steel tribe, who inhabited what is now British Columbia in Canada. According to their legends, these creatures were guardians of the forest, beings who lived away from humans and were highly respected. But it wasn't until the 20th century that Bigfoot really caught the attention of the entire world. In 1958, a road contractor in California named Jerry Crew found huge footprints near Bluff Creek, leading to the first major wave of media interest. From there, Bigfoot became an icon of popular culture, appearing in documentaries, movies, and even toys. Another key event in the search for these creatures was the famous Bigfoot footage in 1967 by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin in Bluff Creek, California. Although it wasn't exactly a formal expedition, the two men had set out to find evidence of the Sasquatch and captured on video what many believe to be a Bigfoot walking in the distance. That video, despite its blurry quality and the debates surrounding its authenticity, remains one of the most iconic in Bigfoot history. Bigfoot and his international cousins. Now, before you think that Bigfoot is one of a kind, let me tell you that there are accounts of similar creatures in many other countries. Let's take a trip around the world to meet some of this mysterious being's relatives. The interesting thing about Bigfoot is that, although there is no hard scientific proof of its existence, it has managed to become such a big cultural figure that it has its own day of celebration. Sighting stories keep popping up year after year, with some claiming there is more than one Bigfoot roaming around. But why limit it to just America? Let's take a look at what's happening in other places around the world. Yeti, Bigfoot's cold cousin in the Himalayas. When we talk about mysterious creatures, we can't ignore the famous Yeti. While Bigfoot prefers the dense forests of North America, his cousin Yeti is more on the cold team and lives in the Himalayan mountains. Also known as the abominable snowman, the Yeti is described as a large, hairy creature, albeit with lighter fur than Bigfoot. The reason? Well, because if you live among the snow, you better camouflage yourself a bit. Stories of the Yeti are as old as the Himalayan mountains themselves. Local legends tell of shepherds and mountaineers seeing giant footprints in the snow since time immemorial. The term Yeti comes from the Sherpa language and means something like wild animal. And while there is no solid evidence of its existence, just like with Bigfoot, the sightings and stories continue. There have even been entire expeditions dedicated to finding this creature. But so far, the Yeti remains as elusive as ever. One of the most famous expeditions in search of mythical creatures was that of British mountaineer Eric Shipton in 1951. While exploring the Himalayas, Shipton and his team discovered what appeared to be huge footprints in the snow, which they attributed to the legendary Yeti. Photos of these footprints went around the world, sparking global interest in the possible existence of the abominable snowman. Although the footprints were not definitive proof, they served to inspire future expeditions and cement the Yeti legend. Almasty. The Turks, Iranians, and especially the Mongolian people have their own belief in this regard. It is called Almasty, and, like its American cousins, it is described as a large, hairy, humanoid creature. The Almasty has been seen mainly in mountainous regions. Although not as famous as Bigfoot or the Yeti, stories about this creature date back centuries. Villagers in these areas say that it is smaller than Bigfoot, but still incredibly strong and agile. Some reports even say that it may be nocturnal, which could explain why it is so hard to find. As with other similar creatures, science has yet to confirm its existence, but locals swear they have seen something. Yowie, the Australian Bigfoot. Did you think Australia only had kangaroos and koalas? In the lands of the Australian outback, there are stories of a mysterious creature called the Yowie. This creature is practically the Australian equivalent of Bigfoot, although there are some differences. The Yowie is described as tall and hairy, but sometimes with more aggressive behavior than its North American cousin. Stories of encounters with the Yowie date back to the legends of the Australian Aborigines, who described it as a creature that roamed the forests and mountains. The Yowie has captured the attention of modern mythbusters, and some have even mounted expeditions to find it. So far, all they have found are strange footprints and blurry accounts, but the legend lives on. Mapinguari, the guardian of the Amazon rainforest. Let's now travel to South America, where we encounter an equally fascinating creature. In the dense Amazon rainforest, locals speak of the Mapinguari, a giant beast that prowls among the trees. The Mapinguari is not only hairy and huge, but is also credited with some supernatural abilities, such as a terrible smell that can render people unconscious if they get too close. Accounts of the Mapinguari vary depending on the region, but all agree that it is a creature that should not be disturbed. Some believe it could be a giant sloth that did not go extinct, while others see it as an entirely mythical being. Either way, the Mapinguari shares many similarities with Bigfoot. Both are large, elusive creatures, and sightings of it remain a matter of debate. Orang Pendek. If Bigfoot and his cousins are the giants of this world of mysterious creatures, then the Orang Pendek is their miniature version. This creature, which inhabits the jungles of Sumatra in Indonesia, is described as being small, about 5 feet tall, but just as elusive as its larger relatives. Despite its smaller size, it is known for its incredible strength and ability to move quickly through the trees. Some believe it could be an undiscovered hominid, similar to Homo floresiensis, also known as the Hobbit, that lived in Indonesia thousands of years ago. Whatever it is, tales of this creature are as old as the jungles themselves, and while many researchers have attempted to find definitive proof, the little man of the jungle remains a mystery. Wild man of Europe. Hundreds of years ago, in medieval Europe, there was also talk of the wild man of the woods. The wild man of the woods, or woodwose, as he was called in some lands, was said to be a being of great stature and enormous strength. His presence was imposing, not only because of his size, but also because of his appearance. His body was completely covered with long, thick hair, which varied in shades of brown, gray, or even moss green, as if nature itself had claimed him as her own. This hairy mantle made him blend in with his surroundings, resembling forest animals more than civilized men. His face, although human, had something primitive about it, a strong jaw, thick eyebrows, and eyes that shone with an intensity that was difficult to describe, sometimes fierce like a wolf, other times melancholic, as if he carried the weight of a world he had left behind. The wild man lived far from villages and cities, hidden in dense forests, deep in caves, or high in the mountains, where the footprint of man could barely reach. It was not uncommon for woodsmen or hunters who ventured too far to return telling stories of how they had felt his eyes watching them from the undergrowth, or worse, how they had been pursued by him when they had disturbed his home. Why are there so many similar legends? After traveling across continents and meeting Bigfoot's cousins, the logical question would be, why do so many cultures have tales of similar creatures? One possible explanation is that these stories reflect the ancestral fear of the unknown. Since prehistoric times, humans have shared the forests, mountains, and jungles with animals that we often did not fully understand. Perhaps these beings represent the fear of what lurks in the darkness, of what is beyond our control. Another possibility is that, at some point in the past, there may have been a type of hominid or giant creature that inspired these legends. Homo floresiensis, for example, is a small hominid that lived on the island of Flores, Indonesia, more than 50,000 years ago. If creatures like this did exist at some point, it would not be unreasonable to think that stories and oral accounts of their existence have been maintained over the centuries, evolving into the legends we know today. Perhaps such creatures still exist in some form, hidden deep in forests or mountains inaccessible to humanity. Also, some of these legends may have roots in real animals that, when misunderstood or seen under unfavorable conditions, such as fog in the mountains or darkness in the forest, became stories of mythical creatures. Think of the brown bear, which can walk upright for short periods of time. From a distance, and under the right circumstances, it could be easy to mistake it for a giant, hairy creature. And what about science? As widespread as these stories are, modern science remains skeptical about the existence of Bigfoot and its relatives around the world. So far, there has been no conclusive evidence proving the existence of these creatures beyond a few testimonies, dubious footprints, and blurry videos. Many scientists argue that if an animal as large as Bigfoot really existed, we would have already found solid evidence, bones, carcasses, or even clear signs in the ecosystem. However, that hasn't stopped enthusiasts from continuing to search for evidence. Expeditions continue, and every year new accounts of sightings, new videos, and new theories appear. The lack of evidence hasn't been an obstacle to keeping the legend alive. In fact, it's precisely the absence of evidence that seems to make these stories even more attractive. The mystery, after all, is part of the charm. Perhaps at some point, science will be able to shed definitive light on the existence or non-existence of these creatures. Or maybe we'll never find them, and they'll remain part of that mysterious universe of what could be, but is never confirmed. In any case, Bigfoot and its global cousins will continue to be an entertaining topic to discuss, explore, and, why not, dream about. Comment if you know of more similar creatures that haven't appeared in this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and tell me if you liked today's content. Suggestions for future videos are welcome.